So this video today is going to be about robbing Peter to pay Paul, tensions in early Christianity, and the struggle for its identity. The phrase robbing Peter to pay Paul is often used to describe a situation where one problem is solved by creating or exacerbating another. In the context of early Christianity, this metaphor captures the tensions between two critical aspects of the faith, its Jewish roots and its expansion to the Gentiles. The early Christian movement, founded by Jesus of Nazareth, was initially centered around Jewish followers who believed that Jesus was the Messiah promised in Jewish prophecy, Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. However, as Christianity spread beyond the Jewish community, particularly through the efforts of the Apostle Paul, a theological and cultural rift began to develop over how much of Jewish tradition should be retained and how inclusive the new faith should be. The question of whether Gentiles needed to adopt Jewish customs such as circumcision and dietary laws to fully join the Christian community caused significant conflict, exemplified by the relationship between the apostles Peter and Paul. This video will explore the tension between these two leaders and the broader theological struggle in early Christianity, emphasizing the metaphor robbing Peter to pay Paul as a lens for understanding the complexities of identity, inclusion, and tradition in the nascent Christian church. Jesus himself was a Jew, obviously, and his teachings were deeply rooted in Jewish law and traditions. He emphasized the fulfillment of the law of Moses, declaring that he had not come to abolish the law but to fulfill it, Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. Jesus' first followers, including the apostles, were Jewish and viewed his life, death, and resurrection as fulfillment of God's promises to Israel. Early Christian communities, especially in Jerusalem, continued to follow Jewish practices, including circumcision, Sabbath observance, and dietary restrictions, Acts chapter 21, verses 20 to 24. These early Jewish Christians, including Peter, believed that Jesus' mission was to reform Judaism, not replace it. So the notion that one could be Jewish and Christian was foundational to this community, and they were initially hesitant to allow non-Jews to join the faith without adhering to these customs. However, as the gospel message spread beyond the Jewish community, particularly through Paul's missionary journeys, the question arose, should Gentile converts be required to adopt Jewish customs to fully be part of the Christian movement? This issue reached a boiling point at the Council of Jerusalem described in Acts chapter 15. The council was convened to address whether Gentile converts to Christianity should be required to be circumcised and follow the Mosaic law. Some Jewish Christians argued that Gentiles had to become Jews before they could become Christians, Acts chapter 15, verse 1. But Paul, along with Barnabas, argued passionately that Gentiles should not be burdened with these requirements, asserting that faith in Christ alone was sufficient for salvation, Acts chapter 15, verses 10 to 11. The decision of the council under the leadership of James and Peter was a pivotal moment in the early church as it allowed Gentiles to join the Christian faith without adopting Jewish law, Acts chapter 15, verses 19 to 20. This decision paved the way for the widespread acceptance of Gentile converts and was crucial for Christianity's expansion throughout the Roman Empire. Despite the decision of the Council of Jerusalem, the theological tension between Jewish and Gentile Christians continued. Paul, who had been a former persecutor of Christians, Acts chapter 9, verses 1 to 19, became a leading advocate for the inclusion of Gentiles, emphasizing that salvation through Christ was available to all people, regardless of their ethnic or cultural background, Galatians chapter 3, verse 28. His letters, particularly to the churches in Galatia and Rome, reaffirmed this stance. In Galatians chapter 2, verse 16, Paul wrote, "A person is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ," which underscored his belief that Gentiles did not need to adhere to Jewish law to be justified before God. However, this created significant friction with more conservative Jewish Christians who felt that abandoning the law was undermining to the Jewish identity of the Christian movement. The personal confrontation between Peter and Paul, as described in Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 to 14, serves as a vivid example of the deep divisions within the early church. Paul recounts how he publicly rebuked Peter for withdrawing from eating with Gentiles in Antioch, fearing criticism from Jewish Christians who still adhered to the law. Paul accused Peter of hypocrisy, noting that Peter had previously acted in a way that reflected the gospel of grace, but now under pressure was reverting to old Jewish customs that excluded Gentiles, Galatians chapter 2, verse 14. This incident highlights the ongoing tension between the two apostles and between the Jewish and Gentile branches of the Christian movement. Peter, who had been an early leader of the Jerusalem church and champion of the Jewish Christian practices, Acts chapter 2, verses 42 to 47, found himself caught in a theological struggle over the place of Gentiles in the faith. The metaphor of robbing Peter to pay Paul aptly describes the struggle the early church faced with balancing its Jewish roots with its expanding Gentile mission. On one hand, by permitting Gentiles to enter the faith without adopting Jewish customs, the church risked alienating the more traditional Jewish Christians who saw adherence to the law as essential to the integrity of the faith. On the other hand, if the church insisted on maintaining strict adherence to the Mosaic law, it would limit the growth of Christianity among Gentiles and hinder its expansion across the Roman world. As Apostle Paul explained, the law was not meant to save, but to point to the need for Christ. Galatians chapter 3, verse 24. By embracing Gentiles and freeing them from the burdens of the law, the church risked straining its relationship with the Jewish Christians who saw the law as central to their cultural identity. This struggle was not only theological, but also deeply social and cultural. As Christianity grew, particularly in Gentile majority regions, the question of how to define the community of believers became more pressing. Early Christians faced persecution both from Roman authorities and from Jewish religious leaders. Acts chapter 8, verses 1 to 3, Acts chapter 12, verses 1 to 5. In this context, it became more important for the Christian movement to define its identity clearly, especially as a movement distinct from both Judaism and Roman imperial cults. The struggle over Gentile inclusion reflected the broader questions of what it meant to be a Christian and who had the authority to define that identity. Was Christianity simply a reform movement within Judaism, or was it a new religion altogether? Over time, the conflict between Jewish and Gentile Christians led to a gradual separation of Christianity from Judaism. The destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 CE, Matthew chapter 24, verses 1 to 2, and the subsequent persecution of Jewish Christians in Jerusalem further solidified the rift. The Gentile Christian communities, with Paul as one of their chief architects, increasingly saw themselves as distinct from the Jewish synagogue, even as they maintained certain elements of Jewish tradition. As Christian theology developed, the Gentile mission grew in prominence, and the church began to see itself as fulfillment of God's promises to Israel rather than as a continuation of Judaism itself. Romans chapter 11, verses 17 to 24. Despite the ongoing tensions, both Jewish and Gentile Christians played vital roles in the formation of the early church. Jewish Christians, led by figures like Peter, provided a connection to the teachings and traditions of Jesus, while Gentile Christians, guided by Paul, pushed the movement beyond its Jewish origins. Both sides contributed to the creation of a Jewish Christian identity that was global in scope, but yet marked by ongoing struggles over inclusion, identity, and the relationship between tradition and innovation. Eventually, that Judaism gave way. In conclusion, the metaphor of robbing Peter to pay Paul captures the complex theological, cultural, and social struggles that marked the early Christian church. The tension between Jewish and Gentile Christians, embodied in the conflict between Peter and Paul, was pivotal in shaping the development of Christianity as a global faith. By navigating the difficult question of how to include Gentiles while maintaining Jewish traditions, the early church set the stage for the Christian faith to expand across the Roman Empire and beyond. The struggles of the early church, as documented in Acts and the epistles, demonstrate that the early Christians were not only defining their faith, but also grappling with the challenges of creating an inclusive community that transcended ethnic and cultural boundaries. The resolution of these tensions allowed Christianity to grow into a distinct religious movement that continues to evolve to this very day. If you like this message, please like, share, and subscribe. If you're new here, welcome aboard. It's a safe space, all are welcome. If you're returning, I love you so much. Your support of this channel makes it great. In the name of the Most High God, I wish you health, wealth, prosperity, and abundance, blessings, and protection if you so deserve it. Woodman signing off. Have a great day.